Hello and welcome to this April 2018 Get Started with CyVerse webinar. I'm Jason Williams coming to you from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, New York. Welcome. This 1-hour webinar is designed to welcome new account holders and give them an in-person live orientation to some of the features, tools, and services that come with their CyVerse account. So over the course of the next hour or so, I'll be giving you first a quick introduction to CyVerse as a project, followed by a couple of hands-on demos, which you're welcome to follow along with or just watch and then follow later. These demos will include how to upload data, how to use one of our web platforms, the Discovery environment, to analyze data, and also how to access and analyze data on the cloud. Before I go into the actual presentation, let me familiarize you with some of the technology that we're using in this Adobe Connect room. Importantly, this is a live webinar, so at the bottom of your screen you actually have the ability to chat. So at any time, please go ahead and give me any questions that you have related to the project. Off to the side here, I can actually see those questions and I'll be more than happy to answer them at any time. The entire webinar will be recorded, so if at any time there's something you miss, you want to come back to, we'll be notifying everybody that registered with the URL once it's posted to YouTube. Also on the side of the screen there are some links both to the platform and various websites, but also to the presentation, some files you might want to download that might be helpful to you. So all that's there, you can take advantage of that anytime. At the top of the screen, there are little buttons. There's 4 arrows inside one button that actually makes the video full screen. So you have the option of making the video take up the entire screen, and that'll be really useful when I switch to showing you things on my computer. Finally, if you move your mouse anywhere over the video, you actually have the ability to change the quality of the video. So if your connection isn't that good, you can drop from an HD quality to a lower quality video. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to give you a quick presentation just to orient you to the actual project. As you see from our surveys, and maybe you had a chance to take one in the lobby, most of our users find out about us from word of mouth. So we want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the project, the background, because there's always many things that you could be using within CyVerse, but you may not have been aware of. So let me give you a background. So the project itself has a vision. And our vision is to transform science through data-driven discovery, giving you access to the tools and services that you need to do your research. As a community of users, we're now more than 40,000 strong. We have petabytes of user data that have been uploaded and analyzed, and that's resulted in hundreds of publications, courses, and also discoveries that have been enabled by the CyVerse infrastructure. The project itself actually was funded originally in 2008 and had the goal of empowering a new plant biology. It also had a different name, the iPlant Collaborative. Well, that project continued to grow, and there was publicly launched tools appeared in 2010, followed by renewal and funding in 2013, where we started thinking about the entire life sciences, and a renaming of the project in 2016 really opened us up to this idea of data-driven discovery for all of the life sciences. So one really important thing for all of our users to realize is that we're funded by NSF. So we're not a company, we're not a product per se. You don't pay to use us, but we're actually an NSF-funded project. We're your collaborators, we are colleagues, and it's really money that NSF has invested in you as the user that you don't have to directly write a grant for. So all of these products and services are there for you to take advantage of. They've already been invested in. And to that end, not only do we want to acknowledge the support that NSF has given the project, but we like it when you're able to acknowledge that through your citations, through your reference to us, and also really considering that even though this is an NSF project, it's completely open to everyone, the community, to use, and that includes international users, because we know we have lots of collaborators and partnerships that CyVerse has enabled. So please think about citing or acknowledging CyVerse, and there's more information on that on our website. So I've used this term cyber infrastructure. What does it mean? Let me quickly explain. So when you come to actually make use of CyVerse, you're actually using many of the products, tools, and services that in some extent you probably already use every day. So that's access to data storage, that's access to software and high-performance computing, but also people. But the key innovation of CyVerse is to take all of these things and really put them together in a way that plays nicely. Think about an environment, or think about a set of tools and software and HPC, compute, people, all of those systems really custom tailored for the workflow of most biologists today. So practically speaking, we can think of these three areas: platforms, tools, and data sets, storage and compute, training and support. And so when you come to CyVerse, you really have access to all of these, because what good is a platform if you don't have training on it? And what good is support for research, but not necessarily the compute that you need to get that research done? So we need all of those working together in a unified system. The other key take-home message for all of our users is that CyVerse is built for data. So whether you're working with microbes, plants, animals, biomedical, ecological data, or different data types from sequences to images, or whatever the type of data you're working with, really you'll find that CyVerse is ready to accommodate it. This overview gives you a little bit of a 10,000-foot view of what CyVerse actually delivers. On the top layer are what we call the products. Things like our cloud platform, our web interface, the discovery environment, tools for the classroom, tools for looking at images, tools for managing data sets. And we'll give you a little bit more details and even some demos of these. For most bench biologists, this is the layer that you'll be operating at. But underneath the surface, there really are other products and services that keep that running. Everything from keeping your data secure to making it searchable and fair, to the actual hardware systems. And at every level, if you are a developer, you have access to customize in many ways what CyVerse is able to offer. Although this demo will focus primarily on those products at the top layer, if you have questions about anything, please let me know, because that is just part of the suite of tools and services that we provide. Now, when we actually talk a little bit more about the day-to-day science, the way that CyVerse has operated has always been community-focused. So community members like yourself suggest to us or tell us, or our scientists that work with us, we think about what are the popular tools and workflows that are needed. And so these community-identified priorities, things like the ability to do RNA-seq, to assemble genomes, to do variant calling, those are some of the bread and butter applications that most biologists will be coming to use. And while CyVerse is not purely about genomics, certainly in the past and for the foreseeable future, genomic data is a major component of what people come to us for. So the good news is that when you come to use CyVerse, it's more than likely that you'll find many of the tools and workflows that you're already familiar with implemented in CyVerse. In many cases, made much easier to use, especially with the data management aspects, and also made more powerful because you have access perhaps to HPC or computing resources you may not have had access to in your local institution. The other thing that I'd like to say about us as an organization, as we move into some of the details and the products, is that we are a fully collaborative, fully virtual organization. So I'm here at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York, but the majority of CyVerse staff are based at the University of Arizona in Tucson, as well as faculty and staff at the University of Austin, Texas Advanced Computing Center. There's also separately funded efforts, probably the largest of which is the CyVerse UK project, which is a collaboration between several universities and institutions funded by BBSRC. Okay, so now into some of the details here. Sometimes I like to use the analogy of Lego bricks. We have put together 85–95% of the pieces that you need, and often it's that last 5 or 10% that you need to customize. And so we have put those things together in a way that play well, but what are those pieces? Well, the first piece, I think, is the data store. So these are the resources you need to share and manage data with your lab, with colleagues, and the community. Every user has an initial 100 gigabyte allocation. You may need terabytes of data. That's fine too. We just require a little bit of justification, and you can be well on your way to using a pretty powerful system for managing large data sets. The data are automatically backed up. It's very easy to upload, download, and share, and our first demo will give you the basics on getting that started. The discovery environment is a web application. It allows you to run almost any bioinformatics application right from your web browser. It's seamlessly integrated with our data and high-performance computing, and it's also user extensible, which means you can add your own applications. Atmosphere is cloud computing for life sciences. So if you've never used the cloud, we'll talk about that in our final demo. You have access to hundreds of virtual machine images. It's fully customizable and again, fully integrated with our computing and data resources. Although we won't have direct demos, the science APIs are really great for developers. The primary one of which is the Agave API, which is a real science as a service platform. You can define your compute and storage resources, and you can build your own app store, so to speak, of code and workflows. DNA Subway is a tool for the classroom, so if you're looking to teach bioinformatics, really teach authentic course-based research, project-based research, we've wrapped several bioinformatics workflows into classroom-friendly web interfaces that allows you to teach and also analyze real data. BISC is for image analysis, management, and metadata. So if you're working with any of the several hundred image formats that are supported from microscopic to macroscopic, if you need to analyze those images, if you need to organize the metadata around those images, BISC is a pretty powerful platform for that. And with those pieces, now we'll go into our first demo, which is getting data into CyVerse. So I'll remind you on the side of the screen, there are a couple of links that you can view, including the data store guide. I'll show that to you as well. But if you miss anything, it'll be recorded and you'll have the opportunity to see that later. I'll also remind you, if you have questions, right at the bottom at any time, please go ahead and chat. And this would be a good time in that button that is up on the side to make the video full screen so you can better see my computer. Okay, with that said, let's talk about how do you get your data actually into CyVerse. So I mentioned previously, you have access to the CyVerse data store. And just to reiterate, you can store any type of data that's related to your research. You can move those files between different CyVerse systems. You can automate file transfers, and it's really easy to share. There are a couple of different interfaces. I'm going to show them all to you. The primary ones, if you're looking for a point and click, are a third-party software tool called CyberDuck. We'll also show you our web interface, the discovery environment, and if you're used to using the command line, which is quite efficient, I'll show that too. The discovery environment is great for simple upload and download of small files, but since it's an HTTP protocol, it can actually be slower for larger files, and so we're going to recommend CyberDuck. But it's really a fantastic platform for the data management, sharing, metadata, those aspects of it. Makes it quite easy. CyberDuck is probably the all-purpose upload and download tool. So when you're first starting with CyVerse, maybe you have a couple hundred gigs of data that you need to move into CyVerse. CyberDuck turns the data store essentially to something like Dropbox, where you can drag and drop your files, and on a good connection, you'd expect to be able to move 100 gigabytes of data in about 30 minutes. iCommands gives you really full flexibility, so if you're used to using the command line, we provide that third-party software using iRods, which is the system which our entire data store is built on, and is another NSF project. They've produced this iCommand software, which allows you also to fully script against the data store. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick demo, and this might be a time where you might want to visit one of the links, learning.CyVerse.org. This is in beta, but quickly, all of our learning materials are here at learning.CyVerse.org. And one of the first ones you might look at is the data store guide, which I'm just going to open up. I'm not really going to refer to this step by step, but I did want you to be aware that all of those information are present within this guide. So feel free at any time to come back here and see anything that I'm going to cover a little bit quickly than just sort of reading it to you. So the first thing we want to look at is this CyberDuck tool, and the data store guide will lead you through a 5-minute installation and setup. So essentially, you'll download the third-party software as well as the configuration profile. Once you've downloaded it, it'll look something like this. I've already got it installed on my computer, and so this is what it looks like when it's connected, but the first thing you want to do is actually go ahead and start. I'll open up a new window so that you have the opportunity to see that in a new browser. Now, in this case, once you've got it configured, you'll just click this link to the CyVerse data store, and that'll allow you to do an upload. Once you look and see that it's connected on the left-hand side of the screen, these are actually files and folders in my CyVerse data store. If I want to move any one of those, I could click on a particular file and just drag it over to my desktop. and a new window will open asking me or showing me the status. Sometimes it asks me to clean it up if I have too many things there. But that download will start in a few seconds. The very first time you started it goes through some authentication connection, and then again, as I said, within about a 30-minute interval, you could transfer as much as 100 gigabytes on a good connection. Okay, so I'm just looking to see because I have a question. Okay, oh, this is someone letting us know how they heard about us, so that's good. Thank you very much, Anna. If you do have other questions, please feel free anytime. So that download will continue, but really it's just as simple as dragging something from the left and moving over to the right. If I had a file I wanted to upload, let me just quickly create a file on my desktop. Let's see, temp.temp. Okay, so I create a file, and again, if I take that file and drag it over into my CyVerse data store, I'll see in that window that there's an upload that's there, and I'll get the status of that. The CyberDuck is also great because if you have interrupted downloads or you need to restart them for some reason, it's quite robust. So that really is the very first demo, very, very quick. Let me then talk about the command line very quickly. If you don't use the command line, although I love to teach you and suggest that you learn and use some of our learning materials, you can just bear through the next 2 minutes. But if you are familiar with the command line, you'll know that it gives you quite a bit of leverage to customize and automate. So just be aware that the instructions for downloading and installing iCommands is present on the Learning Center, and it's available for Mac as well as, I believe, for Linux. There is not currently, to my knowledge, a Windows version that works well, although now with Windows and Bash it might be possible. I haven't tested that myself. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the terminal. Let's minimize this CyberDuck. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and select a view of this that looks a little bit more clean. New window, basic. There we go. All right. And to use iCommands, it works very much like the Linux commands, which are all, again, on the Learning Center. So if I want to see the contents of my CyVerse data store, rather than ls, I do an ILS to list the contents. And what I see here is a listing of all the things I just saw a moment ago in the CyVerse data store. And to do a download, for example, I can do an iget command. Let's download a folder this time. I'll be recursive, and I want to see be verbose and give me the progress. And I can do that VCFs folder, and then I can download that to my desktop. I hit enter, and as you can see on my desktop, that folder is already there, and I'm just getting a status of that download, and the download is done. I can see, the progress or any sort of metrics in the download, and there that is on my desktop downloaded. So the iCommands is really as simple as, especially familiar with Linux, just using a few basic commands like the ones highlighted here to go ahead and do different types of transfers. Okay, now let me take you to one thing that everyone can use, and that is the CyVerse Discovery environment. Before I actually access it this way, let me go to the CyVerse homepage. So this is CyVerse.org, and if you click on the Analyze link, you'll be taken to some places where you can go, including the Discovery environment if you click Launch. And this is the portal, so I'm going to go ahead and enter my CyVerse username and password. Okay, and this is the CyVerse data discovery environment. Let me close any extraordinary or extraneous things. Let me make it a little bit bigger for you. So now when I come to the CyVerse discovery environment, the first thing we'll focus on is the usage of data. So if I click on data, what I'll see again is a window. And the discovery environment you can think of like a virtual desktop, so to speak. This is my discovery environment window, and when I click on my home folder, I actually see those same folders and files that I saw both on the terminal using iCommands and also a few moments ago when I was using CyberDuck. Okay, so everything is here for any given individual folder or file. There are some metrics such as when it's created or what's there. If I click on something else, oops, I first should unselect that and come back to it. Oops, I want to do this. I can see when things were uploaded, the size, the checksum, all of these different things are happen to be there. So let me go back in that data store guide because the section I'm going to talk about right now is data sharing. So this is going to cover data sharing in the discovery environment, and again, if you look through the guide, you'll see everything I'm about to show you, and if you are having any questions, please let me know and I'll be able to show you something again. So let's say that in this particular case I wanted to share something. Here it looks like I'm sharing a little Perl script. I select that file that I'd like to share, and I can go up to Share and say Create Public Link. There's the file again, and now I see I've created a URL that I could give to anyone. They don't have to have a CyVerse account, and I could just share them. This is very much similar again to Dropbox, where you can create a link in Dropbox and share a file. So I'm going to say Show Link, copy that to the clipboard, and then in this new window, if I paste that link in, what will happen is I'm presented with a dialog to go ahead and download that file or folder. That file, not folders actually. If I no longer want to share that, okay, I could come back to the same menu, and here's a little delete icon, and then that link would no longer be active. If I go back and try that again, it will say that it's not found. So this is just a really quick and simple way to be able to share small files. It does not work with folders, so intentionally. This is for smaller things. I sometimes share presentations, maybe a very small data set. It's just a convenience. So what happens if you want to share really large files or more complex data structures with someone else? Well, that's the next thing I show you, but I will comment that it does require them to have a CyVerse account. So let me show you the next way to share. So let's go back to the discovery environment, and this time let's say that I want to share a folder. I will click a folder to share, and now this time I'll go up to the share menu and say share with collaborators. Now in the bottom it says search for users, so I'll type in a colleague's name, and as I start typing it in, I should find my colleague if they have the account, as well as the institution that it's associated with. And if I want to share, I can click that name. And then I can decide what level of sharing I'd like to give, read, write, or own. If I go back to the data sharing menu, or the data sharing documentation, it just gives me a summary of what each of those means. Read is the lowest level of permission that they can actually just view what's going on. Own is the highest level, and you have to be careful because you also are enabling whoever you share it with to move or delete a file. So you want to do that carefully. But once I decide what level of sharing I'd like to do with this one individual, or it could be several individuals, I can click the word done, and then this would be processed, and literally within a few seconds they would have access. I'm not going to do this now because I use Cornell as an example in every single webinar, and that would get onerous, but you get the idea that you'd be able to do that. And if you wanted to revoke those sharing permissions or come back and change them, you could of course modify, and to entirely revoke sharing, you'd click that X and click done, and then those permissions would be revoked. Anytime you share or something is shared with you, you actually will get a little notification up there. In fact, I can see a colleague has shared something with me, and if I click that notification, pardon me, you will navigate directly to the location in the data store where something has been shared with you. So just be aware, it's fairly easy, and those things end up in the Shared With Me folder. And in the Shared With Me folder, anything that has been shared with you in this way, including things that we share with everyone in the CyVerse infrastructure, there'll be a folder based on their username. Okay. There are really several other features I could show you in the data management as far as uploading files, downloading files, editing. You certainly have the ability to drag and drop and rename, and even searching for files and metadata. Unfortunately, there really just isn't time in the webinar to go into all of those details. However, Hopefully what I've given you so far in just this first demo is the idea, the conception that it's relatively easy to upload, even using drag and drop methods using, for example, CyberDuck. It's very easy to upload those data onto the CyVerse data store. You also have the ability within the discovery environment to take a data set or take a folder and share it with anyone. That's really good because if you have a data set that's, let's say it's a terabyte, you don't want to copy and move that data all over the world. But once you have that terabyte data set uploaded, then you simply enter the names of the collaborators anywhere in the world. Within a few seconds, they have access onto those data. And since the data set are also on a platform where you can analyze data, then they don't have to move those data around, and they can analyze it from wherever they are, which is going to bring me to my next demo, which is how to analyze data with the discovery environment. So I have a few slides to orient that, and we'll come right back to the discovery environment. Okay, so we've covered that demo, and now the question is discovery environment. As I mentioned before, the discovery environment is a platform, and you can run almost any bioinformatics application that you would normally run at the command line. Actually, it's integrated into a fairly easy to use, user-friendly wrapper. So it's quite a nice interface. It's integrated with our data and high-performance computing. You've already seen the data part. We'll see the computing part next to some extent. And it's also user extensible, which means if you come and there's an application that you'd like to use but you don't see it, it's fairly easy to integrate. Either in some cases you may learn how to do that yourself, which is all open and possible, or you can ask us for help. We've covered the data window, upload and download of files. You can share files in various methods. Now let's talk about apps and also about analyses. In this demo, we're going to have a little bit of an example data set. So the task here will take some unaligned DNA sequences in FASTA format and then create a multiple alignment. So it's a fairly straightforward analysis, just one step. But it'll take us through a little bit of an analogy for any other type of analysis you might want to do through the discovery environment. Okay, so I'll put that off to the side and come back to the discovery environment. I've already got my data window open, so let me take a look at the data that I'd like to look at. Let's see, did I put it in my favorites? I don't remember. I think it's just, I'll go to the community data because then everyone can access it. And from community data, I'm going to search for CyVerse training. In fact, I could search, I'm actually kind of clicking through, but that's all right for right now. Let's see, platform guides, discovery environment. And I think we're looking at this example. We're going to use a multiple alignment software called Muscle. But the input for that is some unaligned DNA sequences. So here is a FASTA file, which is a plain text format, which means we can read it. And it's just some DNA sequences that have not been aligned. I'll also remind you, in terms of the learning materials, that if you go back to the CyVerse learning material or Learning Center home, all of these instructions are covered in the Discovery Environment Guide. So there's an example there that takes you through what I'm doing right now. Okay, so I see the data, but I don't actually need to keep it open. I'll close it, and this time I'm going to open up this next menu, which is called Apps or Applications. So in this particular menu, there are several hundred applications that are already integrated into the discovery environment. If I click on, for example, a topic like biology, or let's actually do it by operation and say something like alignment. If I click on something like sequence alignment, I can see all the various apps that are categorized in that way. But I really actually want to search for an application. I don't want to dig for it by clicking through. So I'll type in the word muscle, which will find the application that I'm looking for. There are a couple of different versions of it. But if you look for every application, it has this sort of a square button assigned to it along with the name. If I, in some cases, look, I'll see a rating where the community has rated the app. Some may have app ratings, some may not. If I want to get more information, these three little dots will expand, and this is quite useful. So the app info gives me a short description and even a link to the user manual of that application. I can choose to make it a favorite. I could add comments about the app, but really, if I want to use it, I got to click the name of the app. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to close the application menu in the background. I don't need that. And this is the app. So no matter what application I have in the discovery environment, it's actually going to look very similar to this. This is a sort of an accordion menu where every group of things that I need to do in the application are on these sequential menus. So first I'm going to give some comments. This is a demo for the April. And it's very important, I think, to leave comments and even name your application, your job that you're running, because even though we're doing bioinformatics, especially in a point-and-click environment, to be reproducible, we need to take notes, just as we would for any other experiment. It asks me to choose an output folder, but I'm content with the default, which is analyses. If I wanted to change my defaults, up in there, this little person icon in the upper right, I can set that in preferences. But if I had a shared folder in my lab, like the Williams lab folder, I could share that folder with everyone in my lab, and that's great because my analyses would be open to everyone who I'd like it to be open. So I wouldn't have to ask people, where is the result of some analysis? We'd all put it in a common shared space. So the first thing here is got an asterisk, is select input data. So I'm going to go ahead and click browse, and I need to find that input data file. Now this is going to actually browse to the last place I opened, which is convenient for me, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that DE sample plants and say OK. And the next step, which is also required, is to choose the sequence type, and I remember that this is DNA. So once I've done all those things, I can then click Launch Analysis, and I'll get a notification that this analysis is launched. And on the upper right, under this little notification icon, I can see what's going on as notifications come to me. By the way, I'll also point out that there's a little help icon where you have FAQs and forum, and also you'll see this icon, the intercom icon on the bottom right, which is for live help. So if you do need help, there's a chat function where you can chat with a member of the team who can help you through any analysis that you're working through if you're having any kind of technical issues. Okay, but to actually see what's going on with my job once I've launched it, I need to click on Analyses, where I can see the status of any given job. So here is my job, which is in the status submitted. In a few moments, it would move to running, and then hopefully would complete. And this is also serving as a history of jobs that I've done in the past. I have the option here for jobs to go ahead and cancel if I know that there's something wrong or a reason why I shouldn't do it. But importantly, let me click on this View Parameters link. And in View Parameters, I can actually see all of the settings and even the inputs that I use for this application. This is really important, especially, again, for working within a graphical user interface. I can't explain, or it's difficult, let me put it that way, to explain to somebody in a protocol that I click that button and then this button and then that menu, etc., etc., etc. But in this plain format, which can be exported as a text file, I can see the same types of inputs and outputs that I would have used at the command line, which makes it far easier to keep track of. The other thing I can do here is I can relaunch an application. I'm going to go purposely and choose to search for jobs that I've done in the past. I'm going to search for Top Hat, because I know that these are more complicated. If I click on that, and first let's go View Parameters. You could see I have a whole bunch of parameters that I might have chosen for that. But remember, each one of these parameters is potentially a button that I had to click or a setting I had to type in. And it would be a little bit complicated to go back and do that again. So you actually have the option of taking any past job and click on Relaunch. And when you do, it will open that application. Here's what the Top Hat application looks like. It's got more features than our last muscle job. And from here, everything that I used previously is already set to the exact specifications I used in that job that I clicked Relaunch. In this case, if I wanted to change that ankle length to 7th, I wouldn't have to search for my files again, change the 3 other parameters that I set. So relaunching is really a time saver, and reproducibility really assists with that. Okay, so let me not search for that, let me clear my filter, so to speak, and go back. And also let me just refresh to see what my job is. So right now, it's taking uncharacteristically long. It says submitted, so I'm not going to wait for it. But I'm going to click on the name of my job. And clicking on the name of a job when it's completed will navigate you to the output of that job. So sort of cooking show style, we're going to go to one that's already done. And if I click on a sequence like interleaved, well, this is an output file, I can see that those previously unaligned sequences are now part of this multiple alignment. Okay. So I went through that at a decent clip, but I think you get the idea that within the Discovery environment, everything is point and click, everything is a graphical interface, but you have the ability to search for your favorite app. You can see a few details about that application, what it's used for if you're not familiar with it. You can locate the files that are the inputs for that particular application, and then you can go through and adjust those settings, launch the job, and it will run. This is all running on a remote interface or a remote computing setup in Arizona in most cases. And once you launch that job, it will go to completion. So you don't have to worry about walking away from your computer, closing your laptop. Those jobs will start running. And then you go to your analyses folder where you can see the status and also get updates on those jobs. So no matter whether you're using something that's fairly simple, like the muscle job that we just did, or something that's more sophisticated, the idiom is the same of going through. The interfaces look quite similar, and it's fairly easy to use. So remind you as we go on to our last demo, if you have any questions off to the side here, I can see those, so feel free at the bottom of the screen to chat with any questions you might have, and I'm more than happy to do that at any time. So let's go to our final demo, which is how to use or how to launch an analysis in the cloud. It's quite powerful, especially if you've never done it. I'll give you some information about that and give you a couple of slides in Atmosphere. Okay, I do see I have a question, and let's take a look and see. Questions actually this, and for the social sciences, I'm waiting for the other. It looks like you're still typing, so I'm waiting for that. I'll come back to it. Although I see your social sciences, really any science will be fine. I'm sure if you find applications that we have, maybe you're working with text mining or something else, but I only got that first half of the question where it says you're working in the social sciences and you started to type the rest of it. So I'll assume that that'll show up in a moment. While I'm waiting for that, we'll go ahead to the next demo. Okay. So let me pull up some slides, a little bit of an orientation, and we'll give a demo there. Okay, so this next section is on Atmosphere, which is the cloud computing setup for CyVerse. Some of these terms you may not be familiar with, so I'll define them in just a second. But with CyVerse, you have access to hundreds of virtual machine images. You can fully customize the setup, and it's integrated with CyVerse computing and data resources. Okay, so let me move on, and I'll answer the question I see in just a moment. What is cloud computing? I know many are unfamiliar with this, so let me talk about this first by defining a few terms. The first term that you need to know is something called image. So to define that word image in the context of cloud computing, let me use an analogy. I think we've all been in the situation where you've bought a computer and now you want to take everything from your old computer onto your new computer. So here's the original system, and then maybe you copy documents and your files and you put them onto a hard drive. Okay, great. But there is another type of file that you can actually make to take things from your old system onto your new computer, and that is an image file. So an image is a complete backup of everything on the original computer, including the operating system, including every setting or every parameter that you've set up in that operating system, as well as data. Anything that you have, that complete image is essentially a clone of that machine, a complete backup. So on the new computer, those copied documents and files that come off of the hard drive are still just documents and files. But an image file is basically like reinstalling, almost like moving the entire hard drive from the old computer onto a new computer. So that's what an image is. It really is a file that contains the operating system, a copy of it, as well as any data that you've chosen to include on that image, even down to the background photo on your desktop. The second word that you need to understand is something called instance. So within the CyVerse cloud, we have physical resources. We have CPUs, we have memory in the form of RAM, we have disks. And when you come to use Atmosphere, you're actually asking for a direct allocation of some of those. So we'll give you that allocation, but to actually build a computer, you need not only disk and CPU and RAM, but you need an operating system and software. So when you take that image and you take that allocation of resources, what you get is what we call an instance, which is also known as a virtual machine. and it's going to be accessible at an IP address, so you're going to access it over the internet. When you come to CyVerse, you can access existing images, or you can customize. You can get up to 16-core, 128 gig machines. You can access these via the shell or VNC, and I'm going to show you that all on the web in just a moment. You can also share your image with selected users or make them public. What are some of the use cases? Well, you can run software and data that are monopolizing your laptop or your desktop. You can use desktop-enabled images. So, for example, in the discovery environment, if you were using a software that had its own interface, that it was a graphical interface, that wouldn't work in the discovery environment, but you could potentially get that running in Atmosphere. You have sudo or administrative access, so you don't have to ask someone to install something for you. Your Atmosphere instance is yours to do with as you please. And you can also make, this is one of my favorite use cases, a uniform computing setup. When I teach a class, I know that everybody working on my Atmosphere instances are working with the exact same software configuration, data sets, etc. And you can also make your software available to others. So if you've written scripts or written software, rather than having folks install it, if that's a problem, you can get them running on an Atmosphere. Okay, so I'm going to give a demo, but let me answer the question. The question was about using CyVerse to work with social science data. And so yes, the answer to that is it's completely possible to use CyVerse to work with any type of data. Obviously, CyVerse has been built from the ground up with biologists in mind, so it's potential that some of the software tools that you might be expecting to use within the social sciences, some of them may not exist specifically within CyVerse, but most of the infrastructure is there. So for example, if I was doing a text mining project in R, I might go ahead and launch an Atmosphere image where that's installed, put on my favorite social science tools and install them. But we have users from astronomy, we have users from the computer sciences, so absolutely CyVerse is open to other sciences who want to make use of the infrastructure. If you need help, please contact us and we can talk more about how we can get you going if there's something that you need but you don't quite find. Okay, so let's move on to our final demo, which is going to be how to launch and connect to an instance within Atmosphere. There are a couple of ways of doing that, including using the terminal or VNC. These are all on the web now, so I'm going to show it to you, and it's going to be fairly easy to do, I think. Okay, so let me go back to the CyVerse homepage, and on the CyVerse homepage in that Analyze section, if I click on Atmosphere, it will open a link to the Atmosphere interface. The first thing I see when I go to Atmosphere is going to be a listing of possible software setups or images. And one other reminder, your CyVerse account, when you come to access CyVerse, does not include Atmosphere by default. So you'll have to request access, and you can do that right where you signed up for Atmosphere. Be sure that you are registered with an edu or org or gov email address. And if you have questions, you can check the Learning Center documentation. I do need to log in to be able to access this, so I'm going to click log in, and I think it will already recognize my credentials since I'm signed in to the discovery environment. And there's that live help again. Remember, if I need help, I can see what's going on there. So when I log in, I do get a dashboard telling me, what I've done in the past, what I'm currently using. You'll see that with Atmosphere, I do have an allocation, the number of hours and the number of CPUs that I could use in any given month. There is a limit. So if I need more, I can always click that Need More button to get requests. But let's go ahead and launch a new instance, or at least show you how to do that. And let's search for a topic. If I wanted to search for something like Maker, which is a pipeline for annotating genome sequences, I can see that there are some Maker installed, Maker versions. And if I click on any given version, I can see different tools that may be installed. And I can go ahead and say click Launch. I can configure the size that I need. Not every size will be available at every given moment, but I can go ahead and choose something. And then I can click Launch Instance, and within a few minutes, I'm going to have access to a virtual machine, a computer, where this software has already been installed, and it has the configuration that I've listed here. I'm not going to do that this second. I'm going to press Cancel because I've already got one running. So if I look at my projects in demo here, I started a instance. I can see that that instance is active, which is important. I can't connect unless it's active, and it's got an IP address. I could connect from the terminal, but I'm going to do this over the web first because I just want to show you it's fairly easy. So if I click on the name of that CyVerse training workshop, if I want to enter the command line, I can go ahead and click on enter, or rather open web shell. And what will happen here is that I will see that. Let's see if I remember this. I want to make that a little bit bigger. Okay, Control Shift. And this is my computer on the Atmosphere. So if I do an LS, I can see my folders, etc. But I'm on, if I wanted to use R, for example, I could start R and do some type of analysis. Everything is, as I was using a computer. But this computer didn't exist an hour ago until I started it. But anything I could do on a regular computer, I could do there. This computer happens to have a desktop, so I can go back to Atmosphere and say Open Web Desktop. And now I'm connected to it from the desktop. Maybe I have RStudio installed, which I do. And I could go ahead and start using RStudio over the desktop of this virtual machine. Okay, so I'm going to close that for there. Just wanted to make the point that I can connect to this from a variety of ways. So let's see, my IP address is here. I'm going to keep that open to the side. And if I open up a terminal from my local machine, if you're used to SSH, connecting to your virtual server, I could do SSH, my CyVerse username, at that CyVerse IP address. Yes, I want to connect. Enter my CyVerse password, which is also my sudo password, and now I'm connected to that same machine. If I make a directory on my desktop, it appears on that remote machine. So essentially, what I've been able to do is, within the course of a few minutes, choose a software setup where things that I want to use are already installed, choose a computer that's pretty powerful, potentially a lot more powerful than one I could buy off the shelf. It would take me maybe, for some of the setups, it might be $5,000 or $10,000 to order that, wait a couple weeks to get access to it. Instead, I have on-demand computing. So when I need to do something, I spin up a computer, I make use of it, and then when I'm done, I spin it down. There are a couple of caveats, or a couple of things you need to know. Those are covered in the documentation, but let me just cover some of the most important ones back on the Atmosphere interface. So going back to the interface here, let's take a look. I can see how much time I have left. So I have 168 Atmosphere units. These refresh every month, but that's essentially 168 hours that this could run with one CPU. I have some other options here. The first time I start my Atmosphere instance, you go through the documentation because you need to import data, which you do quite quickly from the CyVerse data store. But when I'm done, if I'm just done for the day, I might actually stop that instance and I can actually, in fact, shelve it and put it aside so that I don't spend down my time and then restart it later. This depends on whether you need the IP address to be there exactly the same when you restart it. If I've made some modifications and I want to save this instance in this configuration, I can make an image of it, and then the very next time I want to do that, or maybe I want 10 other people to be able to use that same configuration, they could use my image if I decide to make it public, or I could even share it with specific individuals. Once I'm totally done, I can click delete, and I do have to be very careful because once I delete an instance, any and all data on that instance will be lost, and no one at CyVerse can retrieve that for you. So you only want to do this when you're fairly sure you have, you're done with it. I won't delete it just this second, just in case there are any last-minute questions. But strictly speaking, really, that's it. Within a few minutes, you can have on-demand access to computing. So last thing to show you. First, I want to give a little bit of an acknowledgement slide to the CyVerse team, and these are the executive team members across 3 of the sites. And then I want to point you to the CyVerse homepage. So this is the CyVerse homepage, which hopefully by now you have seen. And there are news, events, features that you may want to take advantage of, especially with upcoming events. Very often there will be workshops or things you may want to know about. In fact, I know that there's some here. So be aware of these because we do in-person events. We can even do training via virtual or in person, and those things are relatively, generally speaking, free. So there's other information. But the goal of today was hopefully to give you enough to get started, uploading data, understanding what are some of the capabilities of the platform and how they could be extended by you, and also how to get help, including those live help features you'll see almost everywhere, and the main website where you can find access to the Learning Center and other things such as the online wiki, which provides a lot of documentation. So with that said, I just want to allow a few seconds in case I have any last minute questions. There will be a video recording posted within the next day or so, and you'll be notified of that. At the end of this webinar, you'll be pushed to a survey, and we hope that you give us a few seconds of feedback to let us know if there's anything else that we can do to make learning experiences like this one more beneficial for you. So with that said, I want to thank you and all of the several hundred users that we get every single month who sign up as new users. And we look forward both virtually and in person to meeting some of you, in many cases at conferences or workshops, and in general to assisting you in achieving your research and your education objectives.